So the brand new MacBook Pros with the M1 Pro and the M1 Max have completely blown our minds away with the performance, what they're expected to give us. However, a lot of you guys out there also say that this M1 Pro chipset and the M1 Max chipset are really expensive in the brand new MacBook Pros and you just can't afford it, and that you wish there was kind of like an alternative out there. Well, believe it or not, there is, and actually that still is that M1 normal chipset that Apple brought out at the end of last year and have put in a lot of their products then and early this year. And I want to talk to you guys more about why you should possibly consider getting yourself either an M1 over an M1 Pro or M1 Max, or even the alternative way round, getting yourself an M1 Pro and an M1 Max, why you should consider that instead. So Apple have announced some shiny new MacBook Pros and there's some great upgrades inside them. However, the biggest changes that a lot of people are considering is to do with the chipset inside these MacBook Pros. We have now the M1 Pro and the M1 Max, but what comes along with those chipset and those redesigned MacBook Pros is a hefty price tag on both the 14-inch and 16-inch MacBook Pro. And a lot of you guys out there are saying these are really expensive and you wish you could basically get yourself a cheaper system. Well, I want to reveal to you guys that Apple still actually make a actual MacBook Pro and it's still got a really good chipset inside it. And I'm talking about the 13-inch MacBook Pro, and I'm also talking about the MacBook Air, the Mac Mini, and also the iMac if you want to go down the Mac line. If you want an iPad with a Apple Silicon chipset in it, a higher one, get yourself the iPad Pro. But the point is, what I'm trying to get at is the M1 is still a phenomenal chip. We've got to remember here, guys, that with the M1 chipset, it only came out last year and it blew us away right there and then when it came out. M1 is actually faster than the last MacBook Pro that came out, the 16-inch top tier one. So this is one with an Intel i9 processor inside it, and yet M1 can blow this away in benchmark scores, as you can see here with its CPU performance. So don't get me wrong straight away that M1 is no slouch and that you shouldn't consider this. Remember that a MacBook Pro with an M1 chipset inside it cost $1,299 when it came out, and in fact you can probably pick these up now pre-owned even cheaper, and there's also a lot of deals going up and about for this MacBook Pro where you can get it to almost about $1,000 US. And remember that 16-inch MacBook Pro with the Intel i9 chipset inside it, when that came out, that cost $3,400 or just under that. So straight away you can get yourself a MacBook Pro, what's basically costing you about the third of a price of a brand new 16-inch MacBook Pro with that Intel i9, only just till recently, until Apple brought out the M1 Pro and the M1 Max. Now, don't get me wrong, there are a lot of people still out there who should consider getting themselves a M1 Pro and an M1 Max, and I want to talk about that first. Now, I will say this, if you are a person who is basically going into a profession with basically needing a MacBook Pro, so say you're a photographer, or let's say you record videos for a living. So for example, like me, I do videos for YouTube, and you're doing really well at it and you're getting yourself quite big, then these MacBook Pros are absolutely perfect for you. And like I said, if you were like a wedding photographer and your books are filled up in doing wedding photography, yeah, definitely get one. Or let's say, for example, you're constantly making new models in Blender, for example. You're always at it. So yeah, that would also be a good consideration of getting yourself maybe an M1 Pro or an M1 Max. And I actually would even argue here, for the M1 Max, I would only get that if, for example, you really are big in your kind of industry. So saying like that wedding photographer, let's say literally your books are full. Not that you have a couple of bookings a month. Every weekend you're taken out by doing wedding photography. This is what it's for. Same with videos. Let's say you record videos, edit it, and then you've got a job straight away. And then you do the same thing again, you've got another job straight away. That is what the M1 Max chipset is for. The M1 Pro is more of a bit more scaled back for those kind of creators, whereas the M1 chipset is still a phenomenal chipset out there. So remember, like I said, that M1 is more powerful than the Intel i9 chipset. So if you are a student, for example, or let's say that you do a bit of video editing here and there, let's say you edit one video a month and it's like about a 15-minute video, M1 is going to be more than enough for you, and it's been proven over the last year that it is. At the end of the day, a lot of creators out there have actually sold their i9 MacBook Pro for an M1 MacBook Pro, or a Mac with an M1 chipset inside it, because it's better and yet it costs them less to buy. So it is still an incredible device to get, an incredible chipset to get. So yeah, definitely consider getting yourself an M1 chipset inside a MacBook Pro, a MacBook Air, Mac Mini or iMac, because they are still absolutely unbelievable. Something else that is incredible is the giveaway that we're doing on this channel, and it's for this. It's for an iPhone 13 Pro Max 128GB model in Sierra Blue, and I'm going to be giving this away on an international giveaway to one lucky subscriber when we get over 300,000 subscribers. And all you have to do to enter is write down in the comments below on this video of basically what Apple gear or what technology gear you're planning to buy within the next year. Write it down in the comments below, and also at the same time, make sure you subscribe to this channel if you haven't done so already and hit that notification bell, because when we get over the 300,000 subscribers, and only when we get over 300,000 subscribers, I'll be revealing who the winner is, and you'll want to get that notification to find out if you're that lucky person. However, I will also just quickly say that if you do get a message or a comment from somebody saying you won a prize or WhatsApp me for a prize, it is not me, even if it shows my picture saying that. Like I just said, I will only be revealing the winner when we get over 300,000 subscribers. Also at the same time, guys, if you're liking this video so far, please also do press the like button. Well, let's return back to the main video. So something else I'd like to talk about with the M1 chipset, with the M1 Pro and the M1 Max, is to do with the pricing. So right now, you can get yourself a MacBook Air for under $1,000 and you get a full-on machine with screen, everything, you are ready to go. And if you want to up it a little bit more, you can get that MacBook Pro for just over $1,000 now on some good deals. But that MacBook Pro 14-inch model, the one what you can see for sale here with the M1 Pro, you will notice it actually only has got an 8-core CPU. Now you're probably thinking, 8-core CPU, so what? Well, Apple at the event actually talked about a 10-core CPU. And as you can see here, it actually costs more to actually get that model with the 16-core GPU. So actually getting yourself this 8-core CPU M1 Pro MacBook Pro, and that's a mouthful to say, actually costs $1,999. So you're not actually getting that 10-core one. That actually steps into the $2,000 category instead. It's actually far more money. Don't get me wrong, the difference is with an M1 chipset, you do get 4 performance cores and you get 4 efficiency cores. With this 8-core one here that you can see, you actually get 6 performance cores and 2 efficiency cores. So you are getting a little bit more performance. Now something else to also take note of here, and this has been shown in basically Geekbench scores here, is actually the single core for M1 is actually around the same speed as the single core for M1 Pro and M1 Max. Just look at these two benchmarks you can see here for the single core. So there isn't that much difference in it. So if you did actually buy yourself this MacBook Pro, what costs at $2,000 or $1,199 you're actually only just getting about 2 more high performance cores and you're losing 2 efficiency cores. And one thing, like I keep on saying, you've got to think about is what you'll actually be using this MacBook Pro for. If you're going to be using a MacBook Pro for just going on Word, for your studies, I hear a lot of people in the comments saying I'm buying it for my studies, it's not really going to help you. There's no point getting the 14-inch or the 16-inch MacBook Pro. You might as well stick with an M1. If you're going to be in Word, if you're going to be, fiddling around in Excel, or if you're just going to be doing, Teams or Zoom and all these kind of other different kind of apps out there, checking your emails, maybe opening up 20 tabs at one time, get yourself a 16GB M1 chipset MacBook instead. It'll be far better and it will also be far cheaper. Also the fact as well, remember, with the 13-inch MacBook Pro, you actually get a longer battery life compared to the 14-inch MacBook Pro. So if you're using it for studies, things like that, I would definitely actually consider getting yourself the M1 chipset. However, if you are one of those people, like I said earlier, who's a wedding photographer, who does lots of videos, and I mean lots of videos, I'm not just saying I do a couple of videos, 4 videos maybe in the space of July, and then maybe 2 videos in August, and then the rest of the year I don't make any other videos, I just wouldn't get one. I wouldn't get an M1 Pro or an M1 Max. Yes, it is that whole factor that you've got the best brand new MacBook Pro with the most powerful chipset inside it. But what's the point in buying one of those MacBook Pros if you're never going to use it to your full potential? I always remember the analogy of basically buying yourself a Ferrari and all you can do with it is taking it down your road at basically 30 miles per hour or whatever it is, 50 kilometers an hour, and basically that's the fastest you go. What you don't have access to is like a track to drive it around where you could actually use it to its full potential. It's the same thing with these MacBook Pros. If you buy one and you do not use it to its full potential, yes, it may look nice and it may look shiny, but what's the point in having it if you're never going to use it to its full potential? You have wasted a lot of money there. So just be careful there. Try not to go for the image thing. Just actually stick and buy a MacBook Pro for your actual needs. Well guys, it's also time to wrap up this video. So if you have enjoyed watching it, please do press that like button. And also at the same time as well, if you want to hear the latest Apple news, reviews and comparisons, please also do hit that subscribe button, followed by the notification bell. Until next time guys, I will see you really soon. Bye bye now.